Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to day 3 of Audit and Assurance English Revision. Yesterday we saw audit risks and auditors' responses. I explained the concept to you and we did a good 2 sums. Today we're going to do deficiencies, controls and test of controls. But before we begin on deficiencies, controls and test of controls, I will just explain to you the concept of internal controls lightly, like it's just a revision of that concept, and then we will be solving questions again from the ACCA study hub. So do you even realize how important it is to solve questions? Because seeing the questions is one thing, watching a video and just sitting and seeing how it is being solved, but unless and until you yourself log in to your My ACCA page, unless and until you yourself start practice and start typing, you will not get an idea of how to do the questions. That is very important. That is what I mean when I say that you need to practice questions. I'm not saying just read it. Yes, the first time you do the kit, you can do that. You can read it. But the second time you do it, you need to solve on your own. You need to understand how to solve that category of questions. Because in the examination, you don't have to orally give the answers. Neither you just have to dream and just look at the answer. But you have to solve it yourself. So for that reason, the typing practice, the way it is done, that is very important. Don't just look at the questions while solving. When I'm solving it, minimize my screen and at the side, you do your work. When I give you time, you solve it and then you check it with my answer. While I'm picking up the points, you see how it is done and the next question, you do it. Yes? So when you know that I'm starting with this particular question, pause my video. You do it yourself and then check your answer with mine. And I'm not saying my answer is 100% correct. That is why I also do a complete button after that and then I get the right answer below. Compare your answer with the standard answer. See where you stand. That is the meaning of practice. And these last days, you need to just focus on practice. As I told you, the requirement in the question is divided into 2 categories. One which is independent of the question and one which is dependent on the question. The category which is dependent, you have to read the question, pick the points from the question and apply your knowledge. But the ones which are independent, you have to write off what you know. Like 5 elements of assurance engagement. You don't have to read the question to answer that. You need to know what are the 5 elements of assurance engagement. So like that. When you do more and more of questions, you also understand what kind of questions are reoccurring in the exam. And then you can focus on that type of questions. Okay? So this is just a concept of internal controls because we are doing deficiencies, controls and test of controls. Now this topic, deficiencies, controls and test of controls, can be asked as control strengths and test of controls, control weaknesses and recommendations, or deficiencies, controls and test of controls. All this concept is one, but they can be asked in 3 ways. The first way is the examiner will ask you describe deficiencies, controls and give a test of control. Second, identify control weaknesses and give your recommendation. Third, identify control strengths and ways to test if the controls are working properly. So these 3 concept is one, internal controls. So we did the concept of audit risk. Now we're going to do the concept of internal controls. So pay attention to the concept of internal control. What is internal controls? Look here. Internal controls means the controls inside the company, internally in the company. Now, controls means what? Before I enter the company, I have to swipe my card type a company code, only then the gates of the company will open. This is a control by the company so that only employees and people who are related to the company can enter the company. Any outsiders or any such people cannot enter the company without permission. So that is why at the gate of the company there is a card swipe. You have to swipe the card, put your code, only then the gate opens. This is one of the control that the company has. Second control is that the password of the computer in which all the data is stored is generated by a Google authenticator, and that authenticator access only top level officials have. So these are the various controls that the company has on a day-to-day basis. But the important part here is that despite of having controls, are the controls working or not working? Many a times companies have a lot of controls, like we are strict with this, we are strict with that, strict clock in, strict clock out, but the controls are not managed properly. That swiping of the card and putting of the code, the gate even opens when you give a kick to the gate, or the gate even opens when you just push the gate. So this is the risk in the control. The control is there, but it is not working. Okay, so that is known as control risk is high. That means the control is not working. If the control is working properly, that means the risk that the control is not working is low. Okay, so if your controls are working properly, that means your control risk is low. And when your control risk is low, that means your controls are working properly. And if your controls are working properly, the auditor can place more reliance on internal controls and evidence generated internally within the entity because your controls are working properly. So the auditor can place reliance on the company because the controls are working perfect. So what the auditor will do? The audit strategy and the audit plan will be updated to reflect fewer substantive procedures and small sample sizes, because we can trust the company. The controls are working perfect, the controls are working fine, the risk is also low. So we need not do too much of hard work. We can rely on the company for various things. We need not do much hard work. So I will update my audit plan and make it in such a way that I will require fewer substantive procedures and smaller sample sizes. Okay. But what if the control risk is high? That means there are controls in the company, but the controls are not working properly. In that situation, what will I do? The auditor will increase the volume of procedures because since the risk is high, the auditor cannot trust the company because the risk is high and the company is a risky entity. So, increase the volume of procedures conducted, increase the level of substantive procedures. Yes, increase the locations included in audit scope. Maybe the company has 5 branches. Previously, you thought of checking only 2 branches, but now, since the control risk is high, you want to check all 5. So, like that. And you have to update your audit strategy and plan to reflect that additional testing is required at the final audit stage. Because the control risk is high, there are controls in the company, but the controls are not working fine. They're not working properly. So that is the meaning of control risk is low and control risk is high. Now, what are the limitations of internal control? However strong your internal controls are, there are certain inherent limitations of internal controls. What are the inherent limitations? I told you the meaning of inherent yesterday. Inherent means these limitations are there from a long period of time and you cannot really do anything to remove that. The fact that however strong the internal controls are, but they are made by human beings. And human beings are bound to make errors because they are not God and they are not machines, they are not robots. So if human beings is making something, somewhere or the other there might be an error. That is why the next product comes better. And if an iPhone is launched, it is the best iPhone in that year. But the next year something else comes up. The titanium finish, the titanium body. So because this is an inherent limitation of this machinery, that it is a man-made thing. And man-made thing always has a scope for improvement. So similarly, the inherent limitations of internal controls are always there. How much ever you try, how much ever good the controls might be, but ultimately the end point is that These controls, however strong they are made by human beings, and human beings are bound to make errors. So there are certain inherent limitations of internal controls, even though how much ever strong let the controls be. So the first limitation is human error, that is, people can make mistakes, and internal controls are made by human beings. Second, ineffective controls. Sometimes human beings design controls which do not have any use at all. They are absolutely useless, ineffective controls. Third, while making controls, it is not a job of one person. Like, I will not go to the office and say, I want this control. It is a teamwork of all the members coming together and deciding that in the company we require this kind of control. But while the process goes on of discussions of what controls to make, how to make, why to make, where to make, there is bound to be a exchange of opinion between people, and there is bound to be a collusion between that. So maybe my thoughts are something different, your thoughts are something different, and our thoughts might collide, and that is very common. So collusion of staff, when when very informative people or very determined people are working together, there is always a difference of opinion, and there is always a collusion of ideas, because my idea might be something else, somebody else's idea might be something else, but I do not like that idea, they do not like my idea. So similarly, there might be a collusion of staff. Then next, in this process, when they're designing internal controls, there might be one or two people who is the ultimate boss, because everybody in the management are not working at the same level. There is always a boss. Okay, so this boss might feel I am above all. This boss might feel great about himself. So he might abuse his power, that is, make wrong use of his power. So if the boss is at the head, and how much of a good idea I have, but it is in his hands whether to accept my idea or not. He has that power. And sometimes he might not use his power correctly. Just because he hates me, he will not take my idea. He might take somebody else's idea which is not as good as mine. So that is the meaning of the abuse of power by those with ultimate controlling responsibility. The boss has an ultimate controlling responsibility, but just because he hates me academically, he's not taking my idea which is supposed to be very good. That is one more limitation of internal control. And the last one is use of management judgment on the nature and extent of controls it chooses to implement. Okay, so these are all the limitations of internal controls. Now, internal controls in a company are divided into 5 components. Okay, internal controls means what? The controls within the company. So the controls within the company are divided into 5 components. They are classified into 5 components. So what are the different components? The first one is the control environment. The second one is the risk assessment process. The third one is the information system. The fourth one is the control activities, and the fifth one is monitoring. Okay. So components means the parts of internal control. So the first one is control environment. What is the meaning of control environment? In general, what is the meaning of environment? When we were small, since school days, we studied environment means anything around us. Similarly, control environment is the control surrounding within an organization. So what is the surrounding of control within an organization? The governance and management function of the organization, how things are done in the organization, how the controls are there in the organization, the attitude, awareness, actions, commitment, participation, and philosophy of those responsible for designing, implementing, and monitoring internal controls. So the control environment is, in short, the surroundings in a company pertaining to control. Okay, that is the environment in the company, that is the control environment in the company. The second one we have is a risk assessment process. What is the meaning of risk assessment process? Yesterday only we saw this. Risk assessment process means the steps that a company follows to reduce the risk to an acceptable level or eliminate it completely. To reduce the risk at an acceptable level and eliminate it completely, the company needs to first identify the risk, then assess the risk, how greater the risk is or how smaller the risk is, and then think of ways of how to combat the risk or how to reduce it to an acceptable level or eliminate it completely. So the risk assessment processes are how to kill the risk in the company, and for that reason the company needs to first identify the risk. And to identify the risk, the company need to have judgment, need to have skills, need to have experience to pick the risk. Many a times the company is very risky, but since the management is new and all of that, they are not able to identify the risk. It's very important with your own experience to identify that risk. Then look at how deep the risk is, that is, assess the risk, and then give an appropriate response to the risk. That is the second one, which is the risk assessment process. Third is the information system. What is the information system? All procedures and records relevant to financial reporting and communication. That means in the controls, what is the entire system that operates, the procedures that the company follows, and records relevant to financial reporting and communication. Okay. The fourth one is control activities. What does the company do for control in the company? Like to establish a control in the company. How will you show that yes, my company is controlled? For any new purchase, there has to be an authorization. That means purchases are under control. Nobody can just go into the shop and buy anything. Anything that needs to be bought in the company has to be authorized. What will this lead to? This will lead to reduction in unnecessary purchases and purchases for personal use. So anything you need in the company, take an authorization from a person, then go and buy. So this will avoid wastages and this will avoid buying for your personal needs. Then comparisons. Comparing your company with a competitor will make you realize where you stand and how much more you have to work hard to achieve your goal. Then computer controls, that is IT controls. The computer also has a lot of controls like password protected files and all of that, wherein the password is only available to a few people, so only that few people can access that particular file. Arithmetic controls. Arithmetic controls means calculation controls in the computer. Maintaining trial balance and leisure properly, appropriately. Account reconciliations to see if the cash book and bank statement show the right balance, and if not, then what is the reason of the same. And segregation of duties. Segregation of duties to ensure that too much work is not on one person's shoulder, and for every job an appropriate person is selected. Okay. And the fifth one is monitoring. What is the meaning of monitoring? Once the controls are established in the company, the work doesn't get over there. Just like putting the controls and going to sleep like that, no. There has to be a constant monitoring regarding the effectiveness of controls. Now that you have established the controls, are the controls working fine? Are the controls working properly? While monitoring, if you come across that a particular control is not working properly, then repair that control. So that is monitoring. Okay, so 5 components of internal controls: control environment, risk assessment process, information system, control activities, and monitoring. Okay, now give me 1 minute. Okay. The next we have is ascertaining the system. Ascertaining the system means checking the system and getting evidence on the same. Okay. So how will you check the system? First of all, you will inquire of the relevant personnel, whoever has made the system or whoever is operating the system. Second most important thing always is observation. You will always observe if the application of controls is done properly. Tracing a transaction through the system to understand what happens. That means in a company, if there is a control on purchase, so where does the purchase go? Pick one purchase and follow it through the system to see how purchase travels from various control systems to see if it is proper. And last, inspecting the documents such as internal procedure manuals. So this is how you will obtain evidence regarding the design and implementation of control. Whether the controls are designed properly, first of all, by inquiries and observation, and if the controls are implemented properly through tracing and inspection of documents. So this is all in all ascertaining the system. Okay, if you want to screenshot this, please do it. Now this ascertaining the system, you should know it by heart. Even elements of internal control, you should know it by heart. Okay, now documenting internal control system. As an auditor, when I go into the company, I want to document the internal control system. That means I want to write down how the control is operating. So to document, that is, documenting means what? Recording the system. So to record an internal control system, I have various methods. Documenting means what? Recording or writing about the system. So as an auditor, I go into the company, I find that okay, this is the internal control that is there. Now I want to record that control. I want to document that. I want to record that. How will I do it? The first option that I have is via narrative notes. What is a narrative note? A written description of the system. I'll go into the company. If I'm following narrative notes, I will see the entire system and I'll just go on writing. I will fill fullscapes of paper. That is narrative notes. Writing in paragraphs and writing the full description of the system, a written description of the system. Second, if I'm following flowcharts, I will see the system and in my mind, I will study the system and make a diagram of the system. So that is a diagrammatic representation of the system. Narrative notes is written description. Flowcharts is a diagrammatic representation. Then organization charts is diagram with reporting lines, roles and responsibilities. So in organization charts, along with the flowchart, I will write what is the responsibility of whom and how the roles are divided and how the reporting, like who is going to report to whom and how the roles are divided. That I will do in organization charts. The next I have is internal control questionnaire. In the questionnaire, I'll prepare a list of questions and I'll give it to the company and I will ask the company, if you have this control, tick yes. If you don't have this control, tick no. So I will make a list of controls, I will give it and I will tell them, if you have it, tick yes. If you don't have it, tick no. Okay, that is internal control evaluation, internal control questionnaire. The next I have is internal control evaluation questionnaire. In this, I will give them an objective and I will ask the client, what controls do you have in place for this objective? So the client has to write, for this particular objective, I have XYZ control. Then question number 2, if the fire takes place, then what control you have? Then the client will write, if the fire takes place, then I have that thing which detects the fire, with which I can come quickly and I can get rid of the fire and etc. like that. So what is the difference between the two? In internal control questionnaire, I give them the questions and they have to only tick yes or no. In internal control evaluation questionnaire, I give them a situation and they have to tell me what controls they have in place for that situation. An internal control questionnaire and evaluation questionnaire are both part of checklist. In checklist, you have to just tick the boxes. Okay. So narrative notes, written description of the system, flowcharts, diagrammatic representation of the system, organization charts, diagrams along with reporting lines, roles and responsibilities, internal control questionnaire, evaluation questionnaire and checklist. These are the various methods of documenting internal control system, that is system within the company. Okay. Now take a break of 5 minutes before we start the question. Now this is the question that we have. Swift company. The timer started. I've taken it from the study hub itself. You can write the name of the question so that you can solve it later. So this is a question. In the first part, for 6 marks, you need to write narrative notes, flowcharts and questionnaires description and advantage of that. So this is a 1 mark, 6 marks total. Then you have to identify and explain 7 direct controls in the company and describe test of controls the auditor should perform to determine the operative effectiveness of each of these direct controls. 7 controls and 7 test of controls. Test of controls for what? To check if the controls are working properly or not. So test of controls are designed by the auditor to cross-check if the controls in the company are working properly or not. Okay. So that is for 14 marks. So this is a 20 marker question. As I told you, whenever you read a question, you have to start from the requirement. So read the requirement first. Requirement is of 2 categories. One which is independent of the question and one which is dependent of the question. So requirement 1 is independent. Without reading the question, I can answer this. Okay. Requirement 2 is dependent. To answer this, I have to read the question. So first, let's solve requirement A, complete it, and then do requirement B. Okay. So I'm giving you 2 minutes to just go through the requirements and then we start. Now here the only disadvantage is that you cannot make tables. Otherwise in your exam you can actually make tables, but here in the study hub you cannot make that. So that is just one disadvantage which will be solved because the study hub is right now only it is introduced, so that's okay. Okay, so can we start the first one? And then we'll read the question and do the second one because the first requirement is independent, so we can directly do it. So let's do the first requirement. So click on plan the answer, plan your response here. Okay, so this is the A part 1 and 2. So this is A part 1 and 2 together. Okay, 1 and 2. So let's plan it. This is documenting systems. Documenting systems. You will start with the first one that they have asked us is what? Narrative notes, flowcharts and questionnaires. So narrative notes, you have to give description and then give an advantage. So what is the description of narrative notes? It's a written description of the system. So write down narrative notes consist of a written description of the system. It is for 1 mark, so write worth 1 mark. They detail, so what all do you write in that? So they detail what occurs in the system, at each stage, and include details of any controls which operate at each stage. Okay, this is a description. And then the advantage of this, look at the presentation also. Now in the exam I will use the table because I can draw a table there, but here there are no tools to draw a table, so I cannot draw it. So I am doing this presentation. So what is the advantage of narrative notes? When you go in the company, you are just writing the description of the system, so it's easy to record. You don't have to draw anything, just write, you know, like in paragraphs, written description of the system. So they are simple to record. To record this, you just need to have a discussion with the staff, and whatever they say, you just write it down. So after discussion with staff members, and these discussions are easily written up as notes. And one more advantage of narrative notes is that it is not very complicated. It can be understood by everybody because it's just a written description of the system. So you just have to read it like a paragraph that you read. So they can facilitate understanding by all members of the audit team, especially the junior members who might find other methods complicated. Okay, so this is for 2 marks. Then next we have is flowcharts. Flowcharts is what we studied. It's a diagrammatic representation of the system. Flowcharts. Description. It's a diagrammatic illustration of the internal control system. Okay. Then how is it done? You're drawing diagrams using lines to demonstrate sequence of events, like you're making like a flow chart. So you're making branches, you're using lines. So lines usually demonstrate the sequence of events and standard symbols are used to signify controls or documents. Then advantage of this. Now you tell me, there is an internal control system in the company. Okay, with narrative notes, you're writing 10 pages about the system. And with flowchart, you're drawing the entire system on one big page. What is easier to view and understand? Reading 10-20 pages is easier, or viewing that one big page with diagrams and nice flowchart, that is easier, or reading the pages is easier? What is easier is the flowchart, because the flowchart is easy to view and you can literally view the entire internal control system of the company on one big page. So that is the advantage. So write down an advantages with flowcharts. It's easy to view the system entirely presented together in one diagram, right? And when you're viewing the entire system on one page, on one diagram, and you know the step number 1, 2, 3, 4, any missing control can be easily identified. Whereas in narrative notes, if you want to identify a missing control, it is very difficult because it's just written like a paragraph. So where you will search what is missing. But in diagram, you can easily catch what is missing. So that is one more advantage. Due to the use of standard symbol for controls, it can be effective in identifying missing controls. Okay, so that is the advantage of flowcharts. The next we have is questionnaire. Now they have not given which questionnaire, so we will write about both. Okay, so questionnaires. Description. Okay, so write about both internal control questionnaire and internal control evaluation questionnaire, ICQ and ICEQ, contain a list of questions for each major transaction cycle. Okay, now I will write the difference between the two. Internal control questionnaires are used to assess whether controls exist, because you're asking the company, do you have this control? Answer in yes and no. So whether control exists in the company. Whereas in internal control evaluation questionnaire, what you're doing, assess what controls the company has in place. So you're asking the company what controls you have in place for a given control objective. Okay, this is the description. Now what is the advantage of ICQ and ICEQ? What is the advantage? You're preparing a questionnaire. It's quick to prepare and you get the answer also quickly. So questionnaires are quick to prepare, which means they are a timely method for recording the system. Then you're asking the company, do you have this control, do you don't have this control, and you're asking the company what controls they have in place for a given objective. So in this process, missing controls can easily be identified, because in internal control questionnaire, if the company ticks no, that means they are not having the control. And in internal control evaluation questionnaire, when you ask the company what controls they have in place for this objective, and when they reply that we don't have any controls, so using this system, missing controls can easily be identified. So that is one more advantage. Missing controls or deficiencies are clearly highlighted by the audit team. Okay, so this is for 6 marks. Narrative notes, description and advantage, flowcharts, description and advantage, and questionnaire, description and advantage. Now we have the B part. B part 1 and 2 together in the table in the examination, but here we don't have a table. When we do a mock, I will tell you how to do it on the table. So now, in respect of internal control system of Swift company, identify and explain 7 direct controls on which the auditor may plan to rely and test of controls. For that you have to read the question. First, I want you to read the question yourself. So start reading the question and then I will read it. I'm giving you 5 minutes. So identify direct controls and test the controls. So testing the controls is the auditor's way of checking if the controls are working properly. So it is the auditor's thing of how to check the controls. So that will not be given in the question. For that, the auditor has to use his discretion. So let's read the question. It is 1 July 20x5. Swift Company prints books which it sells online and supplies to retailers across the country. The company's year end is 30th September 20x5. You are an audit supervisor with Toucan and Company preparing the draft audit programs and reviewing the internal controls documentation in preparation for the interim audit. Swift Payroll. Swift Company employs factory staff who are required to work a standard shift of 8 hours per day. No staff members are required to work overtime. All staff members are paid monthly by bank transfer. The company has a human resource HR department which is responsible for setting up all new joiners and a payroll department which processes wages and salaries. When a new employee joins the company, HR completes a joiner's form which includes a unique employee number for each new employee. The joiner's form is then sent to the payroll department so that the new employee can be set up for payment. The unique employee number must be entered into the payroll system. One second. Today's okay. The unique employee number must be entered into the payroll system before the employee can be added to payroll. On a monthly basis, an exception report relating to changes to the payroll standing data is produced and reviewed by the payroll manager, who evidences this review. Employee hours worked and their hourly wage rates are pre-set into the system, which automatically calculates the gross and net pay along with relevant deductions and generates employee payslips. The payroll supervisor selects a sample of the payslips, reperforms the gross to net pay calculations, and investigates any discrepancies. The sampled payslips are then signed as evidence of this review. Next we have is purchases. The company has a purchasing department based at its head office. When raw materials are required, the production supervisors submit a requisition form to the purchasing department. A multi-part purchase order is generated and the purchasing manager authorizes all orders up to $5,000. Orders above $5,000 are authorized by the purchasing director. The warehouse team processes goods received from suppliers. They agree the goods received to the purchase order and check the quantity and quality of the goods. On completion of those checks, a goods received note (GRN) is produced. One copy of the GRN is then signed and filed in the warehouse. Another copy of the GRN is sent to the finance department. A payables clerk logs the purchase invoice in batches of 20 into the detailed purchase listing utilizing controls totals. A batch control sheet is completed for each set of 20 invoices and the clerk signs to evidence the checks undertaken. Supplier statement reconciliations are performed on a monthly basis. All differences are fully investigated and the financial controller reviews these reconciliations. Invoices are paid in accordance with the supplier's credit terms. The finance director authorizes the bank transfer payment list for suppliers, having first agreed the amounts to be paid to supporting documentation and having reviewed the list for duplicate payments. Auditors are required to document a company's accounting and internal control systems as part of their audit process. Three methods available for documenting internal control systems are narrative notes, flowcharts, and questionnaires. Now in this question, you have to read the requirement once again. We have to identify 7 direct controls and test of controls. So in this, you have to identify controls and test of controls. So once we read the question, we got an idea of what the question is asking. Now the second time you read the question, you will identify line by line. Like yesterday we did line by line. Yes, control means direct control strengths you have to identify and test if these controls are working properly. So let's start from here. From payroll. Swift company employs factory staff who are required to work a standard shift of 8 hours per day. Okay. No staff members are required to work overtime. Great. All staff members are paid monthly by bank transfer. You have to identify strengths in the system. The company has a HR department which is responsible for setting up all new joiners and payroll department which processes wages and salaries. So in this particular line, it reflects that the company is having different departments for different jobs. So isn't that a good control that the company is having? It is having HR department responsible for setting up all new joiners and payroll department for setting wages and salaries. So there is division of work, there is segregation of duties. Yes, and due to this, it reduces the risk of fictitious employees being set up on the system, and you have also appointed the right person for the right job. So the first one we have in direct control and test of control is, the heading is the segregation of duties. Okay, so in this, Swift company has a separate HR department which is responsible for setting up all new employees. Because of this, what happens? And payroll department for a different job. So having a segregation of roles between HR and payroll departments reduces the risk of fictitious employees being set up and also paid, which would result in overstatement of payroll cost. Okay, this is the control strength that we have segregation of duties. So it reduces the risk of putting fake employees on the system and being paid, because HR is setting people on the system and payroll is paying them. If both the responsibilities are given to one single department, they can set up fake employees and they can even pay them, and that payment can go to their account. But when there are two people, it becomes difficult to do a fraud because both should agree to do that fraud. Okay, so since there is a segregation of duties, it reduces the risk of fictitious or fake employees being set up on the system and also being paid. How will you test if this control is working properly? As an auditor, think of ways in which you can think that if this control is working properly or no. So what will you do? What will you do as an auditor? Review the job descriptions of payroll and HR to confirm the split of responsibilities with regards to setting up new joiners. The first thing, you review their descriptions, their job description, what the payroll does and what the HR does. Then next, discuss with the members of payroll department the process of setting up new joiners, like what is the process that they follow for setting up new joiners, and agree new joiners to documentation undertaken by HR. Because the new joiners should be undertaken by HR, but the payment needs to be made by the finance. Payroll. So make sure that this is done. So this is the auditor's way of checking the system. This is how the auditor can check the system. So the first point, segregation of duties. The controls will have 1 mark and the testing of the controls will have 1 mark. So total 2 marks. Then read the question ahead. When a new employee joins the company, HR completes a joiner's form which includes a unique employee number for each employee. The joiner's form is then sent to the payroll department so that the new employees can be set up for payment. Without this, the unique employee number must be entered into the payroll system before the employee can be added to the payroll. So without this unique employee number, you cannot add an employee to the payroll. That is, without this unique identification number, you cannot pay an employee. Due to this, there will be a reduction of the fictitious employees being set up on the system. So the next control that the company uses, and which is a very great control, is the control of unique employee number. We have to identify the controls in the company, right? So this is the next control of using a unique identification number, a unique employee number. Okay, so what is the control? All employees are assigned a unique employee number by HR. And unless and until this unique employee number is given to payroll, the payroll is unable to process new joiners. Okay, so write down that also. The payroll system is unable to process new joiners without the inclusion of the unique employee number. Okay, and because of this, then what will happen? First, you will write the situation, same like our audit risk and responses. Then you will say, because of the situation, what is the advantage that you're having? Because this is a control. If you're identifying deficiencies, and because of these deficiencies, what will go wrong? That you have to identify. So because of this control, what will happen? As payroll staff are unable to set up new joiners without the employee number. What happens because of that? It reduces the risk of fictitious employees being set up by the payroll. And how will you test if this control is really working, or are they just saying that we are doing this, we are doing that, but they are doing nothing? So in test you will actually find out if this control is working appropriately or not. So how will you test the system? As an auditor, think about it. The company is telling that we have a unique employee number. Unless and until we give this unique employee number to the payroll, they cannot set up new employees and all that. Fine, but as an auditor, you should always have a questioning mind, and you should always exercise professional skepticism. So how will you test if this control is working properly or not? You will use the trial and error method here. So what you will do as an auditor, attempt to add a new joiner to the payroll system without the unique employee number. And what the system should do? The system should reject it. If the system rejects it, that means the control is working properly. And if the system accepts it, that means the control is not working properly. So did you understand how to write down the deficiencies, controls and test of controls? Next. Like that you have to take line wise. Next, we did till here. Okay, now next. On a monthly basis, an exception report relating to changes in the payroll standing data is produced and reviewed by the payroll manager who evidences this review. Now, on a monthly basis, any changes to the payroll data is done, but it's just not done and forgotten. But a responsible official is reviewing this and evidencing his review. How to evidence your review? That means how to keep a mark on yes, I have reviewed it by signing. By signing, you can show them that okay, I have reviewed this. That is the evidence of review. That is a proof of review when you sign it. So it's not like changes are made to the payroll data and nobody just knows about it. If nobody is knowing about the changes, and if changes are not reviewed by a responsible official, anybody can make changes and get done with the fraud. But whatever changes are made on a monthly basis, these changes are reviewed by a responsible official. So even if anybody is trying to conduct a fraud, they cannot, because the data is reviewed monthly by a payroll manager. So that is the next control strength that we have. So the third one, review of exception report. Okay, so on a monthly basis, an exception report of changes to payroll standing data is produced and reviewed by the payroll manager. Right? Because of this, what happens? Whatever happens, you have to write on the next line. Whatever happens, you have to write on the next line. Due to this, what? This ensures that any unauthorized amendments to standing data are identified and investigated on a timely basis So this ensures that if anybody is making any unauthorized changes or amendments to the standing data, they are caught on time and they are amended and investigated on a timely basis. So how will you test if this is actually taking place or not? How will you, the company can tell you anything that we are doing this, we are reviewing the exception report, but as an auditor who has a questioning mind, how will you test if this is really happening or not? Take a few minutes and think about it. How will you test? They have said that whenever the payroll official reviews the exception report, he evidences it with his signature. So you can check if the evidence is there or not. If the evidence is there, that means it is checked. If the evidence is not there, that means the company is lying. So that is how you will test it. So on a sampling basis, because you cannot check every month's exception report. So select for sample of monthly exception reports and review for evidence of review, that is if it is reviewed, and follow up of any unexpected changes by the payroll manager. Okay, so this is review of exception report. Okay, we stopped here. So next para. Every para you will get something, okay? Employee hours worked and their hourly wage rates are preset into the system, which automatically calculates the gross and net pay along with relevant deductions and generate employee slips. So once you put the hours into the system automatically calculates your payment with any deductions like TDS and whatever. But that is not all. The company does something additional. The payroll supervisor selects a sample of this and performs the calculation manually and see if there are any discrepancies or mistakes. So they are not completely relying on machine, But on a sampling basis, whatever the machine has calculated, on a sampling basis, they are recalculating it and checking if there are any mistakes, if there are any discrepancies. And again, the sampled payslips are then signed as evidence for this review. So it's not like the company is only relying on machine, but they're doing the calculations manually and checking stuff. So this is again one more very important control. So the fourth one is recalculation of gross and net pay. Gross to net pay. Okay. So write about the situation, what the payroll supervisor does. The payroll supervisor selects a sample of payslips and recalculates the gross to net pay calculation then compares the result to the output from the payroll system and investigates any discrepancies. Now this is a situation. Because of this situation, what is the advantage that you're getting? That is in the next line you'll write. This reduces the risk that the automated system makes any mistakes. So this reduces the risk that the automated system generates errors during the payroll processing and if there are any errors, then those errors can be identified on a timely basis. Any errors would be identified on a timely basis to prevent wages being over or underpaid. Okay. So how will you test if this is happening? Like the company can tell us anything, that we are cross-checking, we are not just relying on the machine, we are doing this, we are doing that. But what will be the test of control according to the auditor? Again, they are documenting the review, so you can check on a sampling basis if the recalculation of gross to net pay is done, and you can check for documentation of the responsible official. So review the monthly pay slips sampled by the payroll supervisor, because he is doing it on the sampling basis, right? For their signature, for evidence that the review of calculations has been undertaken. Then one more thing you can do is, for a sample of monthly payrolls, reperform the gross to net pay calculation and compare to the payroll system and discuss any discrepancies with the payroll supervisor. Okay, this is what you can do. Then next one. Now the purchases. Okay. Before doing purchases, we take a break of 5 minutes. Okay. The next we have is identifying the controls here in purchases. So the company has a purchasing department based on its head office. When raw materials are required, the production supervisor submit a requisition form to the purchasing department. A multi-part purchase order is generated and the purchasing manager authorizes all orders up to 5,000. Orders over 5,000 are authorized by the purchasing director. So anything that you want to order requires authorization. With this, what happens? Any unnecessary things are not ordered because you do not have the authorization for that. Anything that you want to purchase, you need to take authorization. If it's below $5,000, you have to take the authorization from the manager. If it is above $5,000, you have to take it from the purchasing director. So because of this, what happens? The company is not buying unnecessary products, and the company is not buying products for their personal use because they cannot do it. They don't have the authorization to spend money. Anything below $5,000 requires authorization from the purchasing manager, and anything above $5,000 require authorization from the purchasing director. So that is the next point that we have. Authorization of purchase orders. Authorization of purchase orders So purchase orders up to $5,000 are authorized by the purchasing manager and about $5,000 by the purchasing director. Now this is a fact. Due to this, what happens? This ensures goods are only purchased which are required or which are actually required by Swift Company and these are genuine purchases and relate to genuine business expenses. So how will you test this? If really this is happening or not, because the company can tell us anything, but as an auditor it's our duty to find out if this is the reality or not. So what the auditor can do? Purchases can only be made after authorization. Yes. So select a sample of purchases and see if that purchase was authorized by the manager if the purchase was below 5,000 and by the director if the purchase was above 5,000. So on a sample basis you can do that. So select a sample of purchase orders and review for evidence of authorization in accordance with authorization limits. agree this to the appropriate signature on the approved signature list, to see who approved it on the approved signature list. Okay, then next we have is the sixth one. The warehouse team processes goods received from suppliers. They agree the goods received to the purchase order and check the quantity and the quality of the goods. So when the goods are received, the warehousing team checks for the quantity and quality. Okay, so this is one more control, yes, that they're checking for the quality and the quantity of goods. Yes, and because of this, what happens? Because of checking for quality and quantity, it is that we are not paying for the wrong quantity and we are accepting goods only of good quality, because we are checking for the quantity as well as quality and then making payment. So we are making payment only for the goods and the quantity that is received, and the quality is proper. Okay, now just pay attention. In this question they have asked you to identify 7 controls and test of controls. You might get 10, so now you have to write the best. Okay, so there is one is this one. Next is, on completion of those checks, a goods received notes, that is GRN, is produced. One copy of GRN is then signed and filed in the warehouse, and other copy is sent to the finance department. A payables clerk logs the purchase invoices in batches of 20 into the detailed purchase listing utilizing control totals. A batch control sheet is completed for each set of 20 invoices, and the clerk signed to evidence the checks undertaken. So for every 20 purchases, a separate invoice is made. So what happens because of that? You can pay good attention to those 20. Then once the 20 is done, the next batch of 20, then the next batch of 20. Because if the batch is very big, you cannot provide attention to every order. So the next control we have is control totals on purchase invoices. Purchase invoices are logged into detailed list of purchase in batches using control totals. Okay, utilizing control totals ensures completeness of the 20 batches and accuracy of the input. So this is one control strength. And how will you test if this is happening? You can select one of the control total batches on a sampling basis and review for evidence how the control totals is calculated and if the clerk's signature is there on that or not. So we can write this particular point. Control totals on purchase invoices. Okay, so purchase invoices are logged into the detailed list of purchases in batches using control totals. Because of that, what happens? Utilizing control totals ensures both completeness and accuracy over input and purchase invoices and because of that one more thing's happened. If the invoices are not all input completely and accurately, payables may be misstated. Okay, so how will you test if this is happening? As I told you, on a sampling basis you can do this. You can see. So select a sample of control total sheets and review for evidence of control totals being utilized. And how will you evidence it? By the signature and the clerk's signature. Okay, and then the last one, make sure you pick the best one. So then supplier statement reconciliations are performed on a monthly basis. Now, whenever you perform reconciliations on a monthly basis, if there are any errors in the purchases and if there is any difference between your amount and the reconciled amount, you can make changes. And it's a very good thing that they're performing reconciliation on a monthly basis. So this is one more control strength. Or any differences in the reconciliations are fully investigated, and the financial controller reviews this reconciliation invoices are paid in accordance with the supplier's credit terms. Then the finance director authorizes the bank transfer payment list for suppliers having first agreed the accounts to be paid to supporting documentation and having reviewed the list for duplicate payments. So the finance director authorizes the bank transfer payment. That means in a company, you cannot make payment to anybody. If you want to make any payment, you need to take the authorization of the finance director. Because of this, what happens? Because of this, the employees are not able to pay wrong amounts to suppliers purposely, or they are not able to pay incorrect amounts to fictitious suppliers. Fictitious means fake suppliers, which in turn will come in their bank account. So I think I will write that point. The finance director authorizes the bank transfer payment list for suppliers having first agreed the amounts to be paid to supporting documentation. Means what? If I have to pay 1 lakh to a supplier, first I need a supporting documentation of the same. That okay, 1 lakh worth goods are received. I will check that and then I will authorize the payment. And having reviewed the list for duplicate payments. If there are any duplicate payments, I will review that list and I will cancel down one payment. So that is the last point that I will write. Authorization of bank transfer list. Okay. The finance director authorizes the bank transfer payment list for suppliers after agreeing the amounts to be paid to supporting documentation and reviewing for or any duplicate payments. This is the strength. Okay. Due to this, what happens? Next line. This reduces the risk that suppliers could be paid an incorrect amount or that sums are being paid to fictitious suppliers, that is fake suppliers, which will cause misstatement of payables. Okay, so how will you test if this control is working properly or not? What will you do as an auditor? Because you cannot listen to anything that the management says. The management will tell you, we are checking this, we are checking that. But as an auditor, how will you test it? Payment list is evidenced, is what they are saying. So check the payment list if really it is evidenced by the finance director with his signature. So that is the first thing that you will do. Review the payments list. For evidence of review by the finance director. Then what next you can do? Inquire of account staff. What supporting documentation the finance director request when undertaking the review. Okay. So these are the 7 points and this completes your answer. Now when you complete this answer, if you want to check, just click on confirm. So when you click on confirm, this is your answer. And below that, this is the answer of, so this is the way you have to write it in the examination. So this is the standard answer. So you can just go through your answer and the standard answer. Okay. You can see what points you have missed out or anything like that. Okay. So this was a 20-marker question, which is now over. I hope you guys understood how to answer this type of question. Okay, now you'll go through this. Till then, I'll quickly check the comments. This is the answer written by us. Okay, I'll quickly check the comments on our live channel. If there are any comments. Guys, if you have any comments, please put it in the chat box so I can address them right now. And if you have understood it, also put it there so I will understand. I hope you all understood that, how to do it, how to identify deficiencies. For my dear students from my live classes who are attending the YouTube live, I hope you guys have now understood how to pick up the deficiencies. In this particular question, we had to pick the direct controls, that is the control strengths, and check the test of controls. Sometimes you have to pick up the deficiencies in the controls, that is the bad things in the controls, because of which the control is getting spoiled. And then as an auditor, you have to give a recommendation of how you can improve that control. Okay, so you have to pick deficiencies and give your recommendation. So I'm planning to do the next question on that, provided we have that question in the study hub. Okay, so this was the question on direct controls and test of controls. Now allow me some time to take as a break for 5 minutes, and then we'll continue with the next question. Okay. Now proceeding with the next question. This is the list of questions that we have. So we are going to do this one. Now see, in this question, we're just going to do the B part, which is for 16 marks. Are you all seeing this? Identify and explain 8 deficiencies. Deficiencies means what? Problems in Chamomile company's cash receipts and payment system, and provide a recommendation to address or solve each of the deficiencies. So you have to identify the deficiencies in their cash and payment system, which is an internal control system, and give a recommendation on that. So once you read the requirement, we're just going to solve the B part. Then we can start the answer. See this. But here we do not have any tools to make the columns. In exam usually you have tools, but here you don't. So it would have been better if we had some tools. Okay. So let's read the question and then plan the answer. Identify and explain 8 deficiencies in Chamomile company's cash receipts and payment system, and provide a recommendation to address each of these deficiencies. Chamomile company. It is 1 July 20x5. Chamomile company operates 6 restaurants and bar venues which are open 7 days a week. The company's year end is 31 July 20x5. You are the audit supervisor reviewing the controls documentation in relation to the cash receipts and payment system in preparation for the interim audit, which will involve visiting a number of venues as well as the head office. The company has a small internal audit department based at head office. When you're reading it, you're just not reading it for the sake of it, but you're understanding and reading it. The purchasing department, based at the company's head office, is responsible for ordering food and beverages for all 6 venues. In addition, each venue has a petty cash float of $400 held in the safe, which is used for the purchase of sundry items. When making purchase of sundries, employees are required to obtain the funds from the restaurant manager, purchase the sundries and return any excess money and the receipt to the manager. At any time, the petty cash sum held at receipts should equal the float of $400, but it has been noted by the company's IA department that on some occasions this has not been the case. Each venue has 5 cash tills, that is cash registers, to take payments from customers. 3 are located in the bar area and 2 in the restaurant area. Customers can pay using either cash or a credit card, and for any transactions, either the credit card vouchers or cash are placed in the till by the employee operating the till. To speed up the payment process, each venue has a specific logon code which can be used to access all 5 tills and is changed every 2 weeks. At each venue, at the end of the day, the tills are closed down by the restaurant manager, who counts the total cash in all 5 tills and the sums of the credit card vouchers and these totals are reconciled with the aggregated daily readings of sales taken from each till. Any discrepancies are noted on the daily sales sheet. The daily sales sheet records the sales per the tills, the cash counted, and the total credit card vouchers, as well as any discrepancies. These sheets are scanned and emailed to the cashier at head office at the end of each week. Approximately 30% of Chamomile Company's customers pay in cash for their restaurant or bar bills. Cash is stored in the safe at each venue on a daily basis after the sales reconciliation has been undertaken. Each safe is accessed via a key which the restaurant manager has responsibility for. Each key is stored in a drawer of the manager's desk when not being used. Cash is transferred to the bank via daily collection by a security company. The security company provides a receipt for the sums collected, and these receipts are immediately forwarded to head office. The credit card company remits the amounts due directly into Chamomile Company's bank account within 2 days of the transaction. At head office, on receipt of the daily sales sheets and security company receipts, the cashier agrees the cash transferred by the security company has been banked for all venues. She agrees the cash per the daily sales sheet to bank deposit slips and to the bank statements. The cashier updates the cash book with the cash banked and details of the credit card vouchers from the daily sales sheet. On a monthly basis, the credit card company sends a statement of all credit card receipts from the 6 venues, which is filed by the cashier. Every 2 months, the cashier reconciles the bank statements to the cash book. The reconciliations are reviewed by the financial controller, who evidences her review by signature, and these are filed in the accounts department. All purchases of food and beverages for the venues are paid by bank transfer. At the relevant payment dates, the finance director is given the total amount of payment list which he authorizes. Now, this is the first time we read the question. We kind of understood the question. Now, line-wise. And line-wise, you will find the deficiencies in the system and give a recommendation. So now just reflect on the question and find out from the first paragraph at least 2 or 3. Till then I will start. Till then I will check the comments. From this paragraph, there is one deficiency, a very nice deficiency in the system. Try to identify that. So what is the situation here? Read the paragraph once again. The purchasing department based at the company's head office is responsible for ordering food and beverages for all 6 venues. Yes. In addition, each venue has a petty cash float of $400 held in the safe, which is used for purchase of sundry items. So to purchase sundry items means small items, there is cash kept aside. For that you don't need authorization of anybody, but this cash is only for sundry items relating to the business, $400. But when you want to make purchase of these sundries, employees are required to obtain the funds from the restaurant manager, purchase the sundries and return any excess money and a receipt to the manager. So what needs to be done is this 400 is kept separate to buy any sundry or small items. Okay, but when you have to make the purchase, you have to take this amount from the manager. You cannot directly go and take the amount. You have to request the manager that this is the item that I want to purchase, give me $100. You take that money, you go, you purchase the item, whatever is the remaining amount. Say for example, you have a remaining amount of $20. So along with the receipt of your purchase of $80, the receipt and the remaining amount should be returned to the manager. At any time, the petty cash sum held and receipts should equal the float of 400. Means at any given time, you need to have same balance, that if receipt is for 80, you need to have the remaining amount in the float. But it is noted by the company's internal audit department that on some occasions this does not match. On some occasions your receipt and the remaining amount does not match. What does that mean? There's a deficiency in the system? Yes. That means employees are taking money and not giving back the change. Or maybe they're taking the money and buying something for non-business related items. So this is the deficiency in the system. The deficiency is this. At any time, the petty cash sum held and receipt should equal the float of 400, but it has been noted that by the company's IA department, that is internal audit department, that on some occasions this has not been the case. So what needs to be done for the same? You have to give a recommendation. Yes, so let's write about the first one. B. Deficiencies and recommendations. B. Deficiencies and recommendations. The first one. Petty cash differences. Okay, so write about that first. Each restaurant maintains a petty cash float. First write about the situation of $400, right? And at any point in time, the receipts and funds present should equal the float. Okay, right? But what is the problem now? Write down the problem. It has been noted by the internal audit department that on occasions there are differences due to the fact that no log is maintained of petty cash request. Now in next paragraph, what will you write? Because of this, what happens? So what happens because of this? This could result, or this could be a result of sundry items being purchased without the relevant receipt or vouchers being returned. And one more thing, because of this, what can happen is the cash can be misappropriated. That is, the cash can be used for wrong reasons because the log is not maintained anyways of where the payments are going. So one more possibility, there is also a possibility that the cash is being misappropriated by staff members or being spent on non-business related items, that is maybe personal items. So this is the deficiency. Now what can be your recommendation on this as an auditor? R is recommendation, okay? What can be your recommendation on the same? How can you address this issue? First of all, a log should be maintained regarding where you're spending the money, first thing. And whenever an employee is spending the money, he should provide the receipt and the change. Right? So write down a petty cash log should be maintained so the purchase of sundry items is recorded in the log along with the sum borrowed, date and employee. Okay, this is the first thing. And this log should be updated to confirm return of funds and receipts. Okay, so that is the next thing. The second point, we will see how much time permits us, but the remaining you can always solve because now you have understood the methodology of solving it. Each venue has 5 cash tills, that is cash registers, to make payments to the customers. 3 are located in the bar area and 2 in the restaurant area. Customers can pay either using cash or credit card. For any transactions, either the credit card, vouchers or cash are placed in the till by the employee operating the till. That means till means, in the shops when you make the payment, they open that drawer and there are different notes of 500, 1000, 100, 2000, whatever, and then they just pick and give you the change. That is the till. And to speed up this payment process, each venue has a specific logon code which can be used to access all 5 tills and is changed every 2 weeks. So this till, to speed up the process, there is one logon code which can be used on all 5 tills. Can you imagine that? Just to have access to the tills faster. And this code is changed every 2 weeks. So if anybody comes to know about the code, he can do fraud, like the amount of time he has to make the fraud is 2 weeks, which is too long. Ideally, what should happen is each employee should have a unique logon code to enter the till. Yes, and that code should be changed every day. So for today, for example, the code is 5662. If somebody comes to know the code today also, no problem, tomorrow again the code is changed. Yes, so nowadays there's this Google Authenticator which gives you a 6-digit code which you can enter for your sites so that your password doesn't get leaked. So you can do a system like that. Just to speed up the process, you cannot keep it open for 2 weeks. Because imagine that from today, 2 weeks, it is the same code. And tomorrow I come to know about the code. I have 2 weeks of time to do a fraud. So why give a chance to the employees to conduct a fraud? So this is a deficiency in the system. This line is a deficiency in the system. So write about it. The second one is access to tills. Okay. So to speed up the cash payment by customers for each venue, the tills have, and one more thing, for all 5 venues the tills have the same code. So imagine I come to know about the code. I know that at all the 5 tills the code is the same, and that also for 2 weeks. So I can call up my friend who is at a different location and tell him, you know what the code is, this is the code, and let's, we can do a fraud. So like that, for each venue the tills have the same logon code. And these codes are changed every 2 weeks. Next paragraph, what will you write? Because of this, what happens? In the event of cash discrepancies arising in the tills, it would be difficult to ascertain which employees may be responsible for these discrepancies, because everybody has access to the till, as there is no way of tracking who used the till. Are you understanding? If there is any cash discrepancies or if there is any cash misappropriation, you will not be able to find out which employee did it, because all the employees have access to the till and all 5 tills around have the same code. So how will you find out who did the fraud? Yes? And because of this, what can happen? Again, this could lead to cash being easily misappropriated. Okay, so what can be your response for the same as an auditor? How can you give them a recommendation, not response, what recommendation can you give them to improve on the access to tills? as I told you, a unique logon code. Yes. So each employee should be provided with a unique logon code and this is required to be entered when using the tills. Then what else can you do? One more thing we can do is, in order to facilitate the investigation, of till differences, employees should be allocated to a specific till point for their shift. Okay, so this is what we can do. Then the third one, each venue has 5 tills. So if there is one venue, there is 5 tills. Second venue, other 5 tills. Third venue, other 5 tills. So every venue has 5 tills. Okay. Now next paragraph. At each venue has 5 tills. Okay. At each venue, at the end of the day, the tills are closed down by the restaurant manager, who counts the total cash in all 5 tills and the sum of credit card vouchers, and these totals are reconciled with the aggregate daily readings of the sales taken from each till. Any discrepancies are noted on the daily sheets. The daily sales sheets records the sales per the tills, the cash counted, and the total credit card vouchers, as well as any discrepancies. These sheets are scanned and emailed to the cashier at the head office at the end of each week. Now the reconciliations of the tills to the daily sales recordings are performed in total for all 5 tills at each venue, for one venue for all 5 tills. But when an exception arises or when a problem arises, it will be difficult to identify the problem has arrived from which till, because at each venue there are 5 tills and you're doing the reconciliation for entirely. Like venue wise you're not doing till wise, you're doing venue wise. So for one venue together, all 5 tills adding together, second. But you don't know in this venue the problem arises in which till. Is it in till number 2? Is it in till number 3? That we do not know. Instead of doing venue wise, I would suggest pick a venue and do it till wise. Do for till 1, till 2, till 3, till 4, till 5, and then move to the next venue. Here what they're doing venue wise. So when you're doing venue wise, if there is any discrepancy, we cannot find out from which till it is coming. And unless and until we find out that, next year also same will happen, next year also same will happen. So that is a deficiency. So write down the third point. Tills are reconciled in total. Okay, so the reconciliations of the tills to the daily sales readings are performed in total for all 5 tills, at each venue. Rather than for each till. Ideally, they should have performed it for each till, right? Due to this, what happens? What is the problem that arises? This means when exception arise, it will be difficult to identify which till caused the difference. Therefore, employees may require further till training or may have undertaken fraudulent transaction. Okay, so what can your recommendation for the same be? As an auditor, what can you do? You can give them an advice that have reconciliations for till wise rather than venue wise. So pick a venue and do for till 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then go to venue 2. So give your recommendation. The reconciliations should be undertaken on an individual one second. Just give me a break. Yeah, sorry, just got a call. So what will your suggestion be? The reconciliation should be undertaken on an individual till by till basis rather than aggregate, and any discrepancies noted should be investigated immediately. Okay, that's your recommendation. Now next paragraph. At each venue at the end of the day, the tills are closed down by the restaurant manager. So that means the totaling of the tills is done by the restaurant manager. He only counts the total cash in all 5 tills and the sums of the credit card vouchers, and he aggregates the totals and reconciles with aggregated daily readings of the sale. He only identifies any discrepancies and notes on the daily sheets. The daily sales sheets records the sales per the tills, the cash counted, and the total credit card vouchers, as well as any discrepancies. and these sheets are scanned and emailed to the cashier at the head office at the end of the week. Now this entire job is done by the restaurant manager alone. This entire job from here is done by the restaurant manager alone. The cashing up of tills along with recording of any discrepancies is undertaken by one individual, that is the restaurant manager. Now there is a possibility that he could remove some cash aside while doing all this, because he is only doing the total, he is only recording the discrepancies. So when a single person is doing a lot of work, it's very easy for him to do fraud. Yes, and this is a deficiency. So what can be your recommendation for the same? Because you cannot just find the deficiencies and move ahead. You have to provide them with a recommendation. So what can your recommendation do? At least assign 2 individuals to do the job. Maybe a manager and his assistant who can do together. They can sit, they can count the cash, they can aggregate it, they can find out discrepancies and all of that. Because if a single person is involved, it's very easy for that person to do a fraud. So that is the next point that we have. And the heading of this point can be lack of segregation of duties. Okay, lack of segregation of duties. So the cashing up of tills along with the recording of any cash discrepancies is undertaken. This is the issue, okay, by just one individual. That is the restaurant manager. Okay, so because of that, what happens? The second paragraph, there is a risk. So are you seeing how paragraph wise we are identifying the deficiencies? Yes, so there is a risk as the manager could remove some of the cash and then simply record that there was an exception on the daily sales list. So this is the issue. So what can your recommendation be for the same? Hire somebody else, like an assistant, right? So the cashing up process should be undertaken by 2 individuals together. Ideally, an assistant manager and the restaurant manager. So how can you divide responsibilities? One can count the cash and the other can record it. So one should count the cash and the other should record it. Okay, then what else? If there are any discrepancies or any exceptions to the till reading, should be double checked. To confirm that they are not simply arithmetical errors. Okay, so this can be done. This is the fourth one. So this is how you will write the points. Now see here. Now these sheets are scanned and emailed to the cashier at the head office at the end of each week. If it is sent daily, the possibility of things getting missed will be less. But there's a span of 1 week after which it is emailed. So it is very well possible that, in the process of 1 week, there are so many sheets that 1 or 2 sheets here and there gets misplaced. If you do it at the end of every day, you know that, okay, today's work I have emailed, tomorrow's work I have emailed, so daily. And if daily sheets are sequentially numbered also, it will be better, like 1, 2, 3, 4. So if there is any missing one, 6 is missing, so you can identify that. But this you're doing it at the end of the week. Now at the end of the week, there's so many sheets, so you will not even understand if any of the sheet is missing. So that is the next deficiency. Okay, and you write down risk of incomplete / missing sheets. Okay, so daily sales sheets are scanned and emailed to the head office on a weekly basis. So what is the problem because of this? There is a possibility that some sales sheets could be misplaced by the restaurant manager. Okay, and because of that, what will happen? Obviously it could be misplaced because the entire week work is going at once, so there is very much a possibility, plus the fact that he's doing everything alone. So this will result in incomplete sales and cash receipt data being recorded into the accounting system. So what will be your recommendation for this that they are doing? What will be your recommendation on getting over the incomplete or missing sheets? First of all, send it daily. Second, if you sequentially number the sheets, if any number is missing from the sequence, you can easily identify that. So daily sales sheets for each venue should be sequentially numbered and remitted to head office on a daily basis. Then at head office, what needs to be done? they can run a sequence check. A sequence check should be undertaken on a regular basis to identify any missing sheets and any gaps, that is the missing sheets, should be investigated further. The next now from here, right, this thing is done. At each venue, at the end of the day, the tills are closed down by the restaurant manager, who counts the cash in all 5 tills and the sum of credit card vouchers. No, this is done, no? Yeah, sorry. Approximately 30% of Chamomile Company's customers pay in cash for their restaurant or bar bills. So 30% are paying in cash, the remaining 70% are paying via credit card. So that is like direct online transaction. There is no real cash that is there in the business right now. 30% are paying cash, so you have that much cash. Cash is stored in the safe at each venue on a daily basis after the sales reconciliation has been undertaken. So this cash is stored safe. It is locked by a key. Each safe is accessed via a key which is the restaurant manager has responsibility for. And can you imagine, this key is stored in a drawer of the manager's desk when not being used. Now this drawer is not locked. Anybody can come and open the cash. So the key is just kept open. Anybody can access the cash. So here in this paragraph, the security of the cash is at stake. So write down, the next point is the security of cash. Okay. Cash is stored in a safe at each venue, and the restaurant manager stores the safe key in a drawer of their desk when not in use. The security company. Cash is transferred to the bank via daily collection by the security company. Although it is taken to the bank daily, but for that period of time the cash is open there. Open as in it's locked, but the key is open. So the next point, although the cash is banked on a daily basis, there could be a significant sum of cash on site each day. And what is the risk because of this? There is a risk of significant cash losses if somebody robs the cash. So there is a risk of significant cash losses due to the theft if access to the safe key is not carefully controlled. Okay, so what can be your recommendation to solve this problem? Instead of having a lock, having a key, how about having a digital lock wherein there's a code and the access to the code is only with the manager? That will be more safer instead of keeping the key here and there. Yes. So my recommendation as an auditor is the current key lock safe should be replaced with a digital code. And only authorized personnel should have the code which should be updated on a regular basis. Okay, this is a sixth one. We want eighth. Now seventh and eighth I will just discuss. If you see, the bank reconciliations are only done every 2 months. One second. See, every 2 months the cashier reconciles the bank statement to the cash book. It's here. Don't you think 2 months is a very long period? At least it should be performed on a monthly basis. That is my recommendation, because if not performed regularly, it will not be effective at identifying fraud and errors on a timely basis. If there's any fraud happening today, you will come to know about that fraud after 2 months, because reconciliations are carried on after 2 months. So this is the next risk. And next is the reconciliations are reviewed by the financial controller, who evidences his review by signature. All purchases of foods and beverage are paid via bank transfer. At the relevant payments date, the finance director is given the total and he authorizes the total. Ideally, there should be someone below the finance director, like the finance manager, who authorizes individual transaction. Yes, because here they are giving him the total for authorization. Now in that total, he doesn't know how much is for business use, how much is for unauthorized use, how much is for personal use. They are just giving him the total amount. But ideally, they should give him the total, because he's the director. He doesn't have that much time to go through individual transactions. But they can hire a manager who can go through individual transaction first, authorize that, and then send the total to the finance director. So that can be done. And then obviously you can give a recommendation for the same. Now after you're done with this particular thing, you just press on confirm. So this is your answer, and then you get the standard answer. So in the standard answer, you can see the last 2 points. Yes. I hope you guys are clear with this particular session today on deficiencies, controls, test of controls, deficiencies, recommendations, control strengths, and the ways to test the controls. Okay, so this can be a permutation and combination of both. Sometimes they can ask you all three: identify the deficiencies, controls, and give a recommendation, like that. So it's just a permutation and combination of that. I hope you guys are clear with the same. Thank you so much for attending today's lecture. This was a very useful lecture according to me, because this is one of the examiner's favorite question in the exam. Thank you so much guys, and all the best for your exams. Please do attend tomorrow's session, as it is on substantive procedures, which a lot of students feel is not important. I don't know why students feel so, but I'm going to show you the importance of that. I'm going to teach you how to identify the substantive procedures, but it is more of something that you have already studied. But for everything you need to have different substantive procedures custom made. Okay, so it is like a semi-dependent question. I will not call it a very dependent question. It is a semi-dependent question. So it is an independent little bit dependent. Okay, so see you guys tomorrow, same time, to do substantive procedures. Thank you so much.